Okay, so that's what we found with the prefaces and the introduction. They were saying, it's all translated from the original Aramaic, original Hebrew, Greek, etc. And we thought, well, they must use the same system as what Victor and Alexander and perhaps others have done by using the root words of the modern vernaculars of those languages, of the Aramaic, the Hebrew, the Greek, etc. Right? Because those root words are very similar in meaning. But when you perhaps read deeper, or you ask them, if you can, they'll say, nope, never heard of it, or nope. Okay? Because if they did, then it would be very similar to, or near the same, as Victor and Alexander's Tab Asheret Aramaic Old Testament and the Galilean Aramaic New Testament, translated into Nearest English equivalent. That's what we believe, right? That's what we've come to realise. So they state in the preface or introduction that their text in English is based upon the Koine Greek text of Nestle Aland. The Nestle Aland text in Greek is the text of Westcott and Hort. And the Nestle and Nestle Aland version of this Greek text will still state, usually in the opening footnote at the bottom of page 1, that this supposed new Nestle or Nestle Aland Greek text is based on Westcott and Hort and or the text of Tischendorf, which is Codex Sinaiticus. If this gets too far in the weeds for those who are just beginners, here may be an easier way, and you've provided possibly a link to those. The Greek false textual base for Westcott and Hort, 1. 2. Westcott and Hort, Codex Sinaiticus, Tischendorf, 8th edition, the Greek text of Nestle Aland. 3. Nestle's false Greek text, the false Nestle Aland Greek text used as a basis for almost all modern versions of the New Testament. The errors, mistranslations and falsehoods of Westcott and Hort have been refuted in many works, including, here's these links here, Moreau, who's this Moreau? Philip Moreau, and Burgon. Okay, so we'll leave the link to this particular book that we're reviewing, and you can come down here and you can have a look, click on those, and you can read those at your own speed, pace, leisure. We should not be surprised that many have happened to find self-satisfaction in the myriad of false versions of the Old and New Testaments. After all, if you look into the details, many who publish the Bible are themselves not followers of Jesus Christ, and they make no claim to be so. They make no claim to not lead you astray. Their claim is that they will be those who market new versions to you. Their priority is sales or direct PDF. What the hell's that? 666? I don't know what they put that there for. No biblical accuracy. The Bible is the #1 best-selling book of all time. It was true 50 years ago, and it is just as true today. The only reason it is not on the New York list of book sales every week is that if it were, it would always be at #1. Simply look up the number of the top-selling books and then look at Bible sales. By understanding the truth hidden in plain sight, you can now understand why publishers, even of false versions, stand to make millions and millions in sales, and the more sales with each new false version offered. So it's the all-time bestseller, but they're hiding that, and they put, say, a Stephen King book up there. He is quite a good writer, and it becomes the #1 seller and makes all this money, okay, when it's actually #2. In many cases, the publishers don't even change the name of the editions, preferring instead that most will be misled by the false label. They hope that the public will not realise that the content between the covers has been entirely changed and is now very different from what a Christian would have read in the Bible 200 years ago. So if they have a copyright to that, right, and they say, oh, okay, you can quote these verses online or on your YouTube channel or whatever, your pamphlets and your church, etc. But if you use 500 words or more, you must put which version you got it from, etc., etc. It's part of that copyright that they own. Yeah, they own those Bibles, right? Those versions. They've got a copyright on it. So they can take you to court and do you if you don't play along with their copyright rules. In many cases, the publishers don't even change the name of the editions, preferring instead that most will be misled by the false label. They hope that the public will not realise that the content between the covers has been entirely changed and is now very different from what a Christian would have read in the Bible 200 years ago or before that. Such is the case with the Reina Valera 1960 Spanish and the New King James versions. That's your New King James Version in better English, today's English. The 1960 Reina Valera rejects the earlier accurate Greek manuscripts from which the Spanish translation of Reina and Valera was made, using instead the falsified Nestle Aland, which is based on Westcott and Hort. The New King James Version, that's the New King James Version, NKJV, is not the same content as the historic 1611 King James Version, having used the same tactic. The New King James Version is based on the false collation of the Herman von Soden, 1911, transmitted via the misnamed Greek text of Hodges and Fastard. The Old Testament text of the New King James Version, NKJV, is based on the false Hebrew text via UBS, what's that, Universal Bible Society, translated by apostate occultist Kittel. We've seen a lot of his translations, but they're mainly in German. This information about which text in Hebrew or Greek was used to translate for the particular version, in this case the NKJV, is right in the preface or the introduction of the NKJV. Kittel himself rejected Christianity, the claims of Jesus Christ, and the inspiration of the Old Testament, even though he translated it. His academic career benefited, but the spiritual fallout of his text has been disastrous and confusing, usually most to those who study it, not realizing its false content. The translator, in this case Rudolf Kittel, was accurate and disclosing of his apostasy. Him and his son were both supposedly apostates, at least in his books. Of his rejection of the New and Old Testament, he wrote books where he stated his falsehoods. Unfortunately for him, it was simply that he did not believe in what he mistranslated, but that did not change the facts of the truth, or the truth of the information contained in the accurate versions of the Old and New Testaments. A little more knowledge, a little more searching, a little more dedication to truth and to God and to historic accuracy, all those factors might have helped him understand the God he claimed would not be found in his own mistranslation. However, regarding Kittel's views about his own attacks on the biblical text, this information was available to those who searched independently for themselves in the works of Kittel. It was just that this information about him was conveniently omitted or left out by both the publishers and by the apostate false Bible societies. They are technically Bible societies in that they publish Bibles, only not accurate ones, anytime they can help it. The modern NIV, TEV, NLT, or the TEV, SEV, RV, Revised Version, or any newly revived Standard Version, NASB, etc. versions of the Bible all follow the false manuscripts. So people are out there who are preaching that and saying, oh, it's the truth, it's the infallible Word of God. Surprise! They're actually corrupted versions, according to this review. Kittel was a false teacher who rejected the Bible and who also despised those who were Hebrews. His son Gerhard Kittel continued in the footsteps of his father. Did we just say that? They're both apostates. Serving as theologian directly under the Führer, or Adolf Hitler, and as an advisor. After World War II, he was tried for war crimes. However, despite this, the work of Gerhard Kittel, Theologisches, it's kind of hard to say, Theologisches Wörterbuch zum Neuen Testament, so it'd be a theological words of the New Testament, or works of the New Testament, or translation, something like that, is still selling well. Whitewashed, translated into English, Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, that's what it means in the English from the German. multi-volume, and published by Zondervan. That's another publishing company got to be aware of, careful of. Infiltration into Christian circles of leadership is nothing new, but the Kittles certainly raised this to a new level. So the others can confirm this is accurate. Here are some of the sources on the conduct of Kittel before and during World War II. Theologians under Hitler: Kittel, Paul Althaus, and Emanuel Hirsch. Betrayal, German churches, and Holocaust. You can click on those when we leave the link to this book under this video. Another book, IBM and the Holocaust, fills in the details of what corporations such as the German Bible Society had to do in order to operate in Germany during World War II. The full title was IBM and the Holocaust, the strategic alliance between Nazi Germany and the America's most powerful corporation. Edwin Black, New York, Crown Publishers. We've done a video on that before. Not so much IBM, but the Roman Catholic Church, etc., in Germany at the time to stay afloat. Okay, they basically sided with the Nazis. They agreed with the Nazis and added this and that propaganda and all this sort of stuff, anti-Jew and so forth. The sad and destructive work of Gerhard Kittel, as well as his high party Nazi affiliations, even during the writing of the German version, multi-volume, also the English is patterned after the German edition, is confirmed and documented also in the university paper, The Theological Faculty of the University of Jena during the Third Reich, which is available, and you click on that link there. Why anyone would wish to have or use any version of the Old Testament translated or worked on by the Kittel family defies logic, especially as the translation is affected by the spiritual understanding or lack thereof of the translator. They rejected the claims of the Old and New Testament, and their own behaviour towards those who were Hebrew was abominable and a strong and serious violation of multitudes of commandments and instructions about how to treat those who are Hebrew, Jewish, etc. Yet any time you are reading from an Old Testament in any modern version in English, with the exception of the translation work of J. Green, you are reading an English Old Testament translated specifically from the work of Kittel. Look at the beginning of your modern version. Read the introduction, for where it will state what the source of the Old Testament translation was for your version. In all cases, it will be the Biblica Hebraica Stut Gartensia. That is the Old Testament translated falsely and based on false Hebrew texts by Kittel. And that Old Testament translated by occultist unbelievers, Kittel, Senior and Junior, has a spiritual impact on those who are reading it. Why anyone would believe that this would not cause great spiritual interference in their own life testifies to the great lack of knowledge about how God operates. Those who wish to know him must know him in truth. Yet Kittel's works are based on falsehoods, fictions, not to mention the errant false Old Testament manuscripts of Ben Asher, dated to around 1,000 years after Christ. Thankfully, the Old Testaments of the Geneva Bible or the Bibles of Calvin, Luther or Beza do not suffer from having been mistranslated by those working for the Third Reich, even though supposedly Martin Luther was deemed an anti-Semitic. This does not mean that the Old or New Testament should not be used, but it does mean that those who are seeking a genuine relationship to God without interference from the translations and inaccurate work need to seek, find and use translations that are accurate and accomplished by translators who actually have a connection to the God whose work they are translating. And that's why we suggest the translations by the Mesopotamian Aramaic speaking translator from Syria, Victor N. Alexander. It would seem that it is time to get rid of false translations and instead use translations that are accurate and reliable, yet translated correctly, accurately into the nearest English equivalent, and not corrupted, not messed with, added to, omitted, etc., verses, passages, etc. The spiritual issue of what happens to you and where your soul will be in eternity or for eternity is not something that textual critics want to face or discuss. Conveniently, That same attitude of disregard is found among many professors who teach on religion, particularly those who teach concerning Christianity, seem somehow only to be hired as long as they despise the text or despise those who follow or try to follow the words of Jesus, of those who take those words literally. So their problem, honestly, is that they do not like followers of Jesus, especially those who put into effect the effects of the words of Jesus to love others. The Kittles seem to have those same attitudes also. It could be a mistake to expect those anti-Jesus professors of religion to actually represent the very worldview and philosophy of Christianity. That they are so revolted and revulsed by, consequently almost no one will be led to truth, nor historical nor biblical accuracy, by trying to learn truth from those official Christ-bashing academics who enjoy their leisure, their tenure and their paycheck on the backs of students who are amassing a life of future debt with little hope of repayment, known as economic slavery. Those conclusions are not popular except with the students, but they are accurate. Those who are seeking truth and accurate manuscripts of the Old and New Testament must find the accurate copies, which is those printed before they have been tampered with. Since around the year 1800, there are 4 standard levels of tampering with the text of the Bible, which are the major stages of false biblical text. They are not hard to understand once the information is known. 1. The changes to the biblical text introduced by the Roman Church. And again, we can provide you with Brian with the beard and the glasses, or the Bible Barbarian. It's a review of these corrupted texts, translations from Martin Luther down to the era where the American Bible Society put out their published versions, their translations, along with their pamphlets full of lies, as an end screen. 1. The changes to the biblical text introduced by the Roman Church. These are the changes that were instituted at the Council of Trent. The Vatican could not reply to their critics. Therefore, instead of admitting problems, they introduced around 14 additional books into the Bible. Is the Apocrypha, right? Several of which actually have historical errors in them. Stuck the new false books between the Old and New Testament, and then passed edicts or laws or decrees, simply declaring the new books to be as divine as the other original genuine 66 books. These additional books were called Apocrypha. The very word Apocrypha means counterfeit. Look it up. And those Apocrypha books had been rejected within the Roman Church as being divine. Jerome, the original translator of the Vulgate, made changes to his own Latin text from the earlier Vetus Itala, the original Latin translation that Jerome was attempting to replace. Accurate Latin N.T. And click on that link there. But Jerome, in the preface to each book of the Apocrypha, which he translated into Latin, stated that the apocryphal books were not inspired. By the time of the Vatican Council of Trent in the 1500s, which is the same council that declared the apocryphal books to be holy and divine, the preface of Jerome, where he had stated those books to not be divine, was dropped from subsequent Vatican printings. The books of the Apocrypha were included in Vatican Bibles starting in the 1500s. And the Inquisition continued its earlier methods of coercion to force people to falsely declare their belief in those false books under penalty of death for disagreement. Of course, being forced to admit a falsehood does not make it true. True and authentic Christian conversion can never be by force or threat. God recognizes the condition of the heart and the sincere will, and not the exterior conformity brought about by coercion, duress, or other illegitimate means. God does not want people to come to him except of their own choice. See, it doesn't say free will there, it says choice. To do so voluntarily, as long as humans are living. The choice of how they respond to God is up to each individual. See, there's a difference between free will and choice. There is no free will because God has commanded House of Israel and Gentiles, etc., all creation to follow him, to come to him and follow his commandments, etc. So that's not free will. Okay, he's giving you a choice though. You decide who will you worship today. Okay, him or the devil. And that then secures your afterlife destiny or fate. Okay? Reward or consequence. Think about it. Though the Vatican has sometimes expressed regret about the Inquisition, it has never admitted it was theologically wrong. Okay, oh, we're sorry, we crossed lands in our days and killed all these people. Very, very sorry. We massacred women, children, males, cattle, whatever. Very sorry about that. But we're not going to say we are theologically wrong. It has also not repaid fortunes, property, and wealth amassed as a result of the infamy either. Yeah, the gold. Go to Italy, southern Italy, look at their churches, they're covered in gold. Okay, people are giving all their money, their possessions, maybe their gold to these churches, and they're basically made of gold. We know that because our boss, when he married his younger wife, he went there on a honeymoon and he came back and said, wow, went to southern Italy and there's all these churches around, right? People are in poverty, but these churches are laden with gold and all this sort of sparkly stuff. It's like, what the hell? And because his new wife was Roman Catholic, apparently. And let us remember the difference between the evil deeds of the Inquisition and individual Catholics, Roman Catholics. Today, many of whom know almost nothing of the long history of abuse of human rights globally, often run out of the Vatican by the wicked priests and evil bureaucrats. The idea that the evil and abuses of children around the world is a result of wrong theology and also simply a continuation of the earlier abuses of families by the Roman Catholic authorities through the Inquisition has still not permeated many of the Roman Catholic laymen, who are still ignorant or in denial, unaware of the need to make a difference between God and the Bible on one hand and the bureaucrats in the hierarchy that runs the Vatican globally and often shields those who harm others. Yeah, see, it's like the mafia, right? In the olden days, you see on those movies, the mafia gun down somebody and all that sort of stuff, and they go get they confess and pay some money to the Roman Catholic Church, and then they carry on, right? Okay. There seems to be as much denial in some Catholic parishes about abuse as there is denial in mainstream Republican circles about the abuses fostered and protected by the George W. Bush, and his dad, older Bush, right? And their continuous presidential ambitions. So this is quite an old review, right? Possibly. 2. The changes to the biblical text that started around the time of the French Revolution, 1793. 3. The changes to the biblical text that started in the early 1800s. This is usually based on the changes of Griesbach. However, it is true that Griesbach had been coached and mentored by critics Semler and Wettstein. I think we have that guy's translation out in a shed or something like that. It's around somewhere. And these were Illuminists who had determined to conduct their wars on religion from within the seminaries and universities operating underground. They were the initiators and progenitors of the movement known today as textual criticism. The works Fire in the Minds of Men and the works on underground Illuminism within academia by Antelman, 2 volumes, explains much about the underground textual criticism movement over the last 300 years, which was designed to replace the true historic Old and New Testaments with modern translations that would be inaccurate. 4. The changes to the Bible text, or the biblical text, that started in the later 1800s. These are the changes introduced by Westcott and Hort. Accurate copies in English of the biblical text, Geneva Bible and the King James Version, 1611. Is that the one with the dedication letter to the then Prince James by the people? We have one of those. 3. Versions by Calvin, Beza and Luther, Levitan, etc. Calvin, Beza, Luther. Modernized. 4. Modernized through accurate version of translator J. Green, available in printed and online. Those who wish to have several choices to study from would do well to obtain all these versions, and they can be often obtained online. Keep in mind that this list does not signify that earlier versions are not accurate. That is not the case. There are other versions and earlier versions of the Old and New Testament that are accurate. However, these listed above are simply printed copies of the biblical text that are accurate and that have been translated from accurate Greek and Hebrew manuscripts. And if you have questions about the meanings of words, there is even a standard dictionary to look up the words. Webster Part 1, Webster Part 2. There's probably links to that. What you do with the information is up to you. It is up to each of us to realize that we are each responsible for our own spiritual understanding, our own spiritual decisions, and all the consequences of those decisions. A decision to not seek truth or to not seek at all are simply examples of decisions. Also, only decisions in the wrong direction. God changes each human with the responsibility God charges each human with the responsibility to decide his own spiritual path, and the consequences of that belong to each of us. Individually, denying this reality will not make it any less so, though God allows those who want themselves to be God to take this on with the consequences also. However, we each still have the right of our own choice. As long as we are living, we can change our minds and make new decisions. The position of the New Testament is that there are forces that seek to distract and prevent you from arriving at actual spiritual truth. The usual antidote, remedy or answer to this is simply to read the New Testament, starting, for example, with the Gospel of John, and then reading the rest of the books of the New Testament. What you read for yourself is usually what will have the best impact on you. Way too many people have allowed themselves to be made afraid to even open the pages of the New Testament, especially often those in Europe who are trained from childhood by the system to recoil and fear anything that has the word religion or God in it. The content, though, of the New Testament is interesting and usually encouraging. Also, in this day and age, choices that help and encourage would seem to be worthwhile. On the other hand, maybe it does not matter what has been prepared for you. Maybe it does not matter what is coming soon. Even many of the details are unknown. And if you happen to be among those who are emergent, or those who are the neo-charismatics headed toward the Vatican, that may be best for everyone, at least until the afterlife. But are you really sure? After all, with such a record in human rights, what could go wrong with the Vatican leading the way? What you decide to learn and how you orient your spiritual journey toward God is up to you, obviously. As others have pointed out, it is hardly original to suggest that on this day your eyes landed here, you had the chance to learn more, and heaven knows those who are given more chances to learn and bring their lives into the wise path. And for those who are interested, how the books of the Old and New Testament were chosen, the text of the Old and New Testament, the historical evidence of the truth of the Scriptures, historical evidences of the Old Testament by Sayce. Professor Sayce was one of the founders of modern archaeology. If your soul or eternal destination matters to you, how would one become a true follower of Christ based on the words of Jesus himself? The books of the Old and New Testaments prove to be accurate and canonical. The evidence and authority of divine revelation, Volume 1 and Volume 2, for the new or the young Christian. If you have already become a true Christian, this is what it means. Great books for Christ followers, the works of Sir Robert Anderson, Lewis Sperry, Chafer Books, Salvation by Alice Chafer, Grace Unmerited, Favour by Alice Chafer, etc. Pilgrim's Progress, How to Study the Bible, Who's the Messiah, New Life in Christ, detailed studies on the return of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, and the events which precede the return of the Messiah. What is the Book of the End of Days, Book of Revelation, Apocalypse about, etc., etc. And then there's some from Central Asia, Persian Farsi, etc., etc. The Old Testament in English, KJV, 1611. The Old Testament in Hebrew, 1524-25, accurate Old Testament Rabbinic Bible, Hebrew Old Testament, 1524-25, and so forth. Studies in English of the accuracy of the oldest and most reliable Hebrew manuscripts, which ones are the most accurate. Introduction to the Masoretico Official Edition by Ginsburg, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Okay, so we hope that this video in this review has given you great insight. Join us for part 3, or part 4, part 5, part 6. Because it's such a long video, I'll probably break it up into smaller portions so you can easily digest it. It won't be too much for you to read or listen to, okay? And digest, take into your mind, right? Embed into your mind or take on board. So if you enjoyed this video, then give us a like, subscribe to our channel, add your comments below this video, and we'll get back to you on those as soon as possible. And then go share this video, or these videos, broken up into smaller portions, with all your family, friends and others, so they will be aware that they may be being duped, suckered, okay, with all these false translations, mistranslations, transliterations, these pastors, these preachers, these reverends, and these different church denominations saying, oh, this is the infallible word of God, hasn't been corrupted, no contradiction, all that sort of stuff, when it's all proven historically, etc., that they actually are. Okay, and they're coming from one particular source, a mother church, and her cohorts, and through publishing companies, these Bible societies, and they're all falsified, corrupted, and so forth. So you got these people on the street, these street evangelists, who tell you, oh, I'm honest, I'm telling the truth, I'm of God. You aren't if you are reading and teaching false translations, interpretations, transliterations. Or you are saying, oh, we were all angels once and we sinned and we got kicked out of heaven and all this sort of stuff. We've come across people like that come up with these wacky ideas, and we say, well, that's not from the original ancient Tab Ashrit or Aramaic, 800 BCE, or the 1st century to 4th century AD. And they say, Aramaic, because they think everything's in Greek, right? Yeah, or they have some sort of cult where they're the chosen ones. They're, of a certain race, being segregationists, separatists, racists, cussing people of different races and all that sort of stuff. Saying, oh, we have to do this, you have to do that, you have to live like this, you have to follow this. Yeah, total false cults. Both, again, using these false translations, mistranslations, interpretations, etc. So, as we said before, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, add your comments below the video, we'll get back to you on those as soon as we can, and go share this with all your family, friends and others to make them aware that the ministry of the real truth is all about making them realise, or make them aware of these mistranslations, these false translations, interpretations, etc., as this person in this particular review has done. We're using it as a backup to what we've been saying since 2018, 2019, when we first created our YouTube channel, The Ministry of the Real Truth.